Hello, Jane.
Hello, George.
Tell us how you first became interested in learning about hypnosis.
I think it was when I read Uncommon Therapy in 1974. I was working at Mount Sinai, and somebody told me about this book. I'd heard a little bit about Erickson, and it was one case in that, the girl with the space between her two front teeth. And I read that, and something happened in my brain, I think. Anyway, I decided then and there I'm going to go and study with him. I don't care where he is, I will find him. Luckily, I found him. And 5 years later, I went and I was 2 weeks in Phoenix with Milton Erickson. I remember somewhere, I don't know, first or second day, he taught hypnosis by putting all of his students into trance. And I remember sitting in that little office right next to his office, a little room, and looking into his eyes and hearing that voice and suddenly feeling this um, kind of waves of feeling that I don't know that I've probably felt before, but it never so deeply and never so persistently. And I came home after 2 weeks there and changed my whole life. That's how I learned about hypnosis.
That's a great story. Did you receive any academic information about hypnosis or hypnosis training during your graduate school education?
No, none. We didn't even talk, as I recall, there was a really great professor, but nobody really talked about communication at all.
Was there talk about the unconscious?
Plenty of talk about the unconscious. It was all psychoanalytic and a lot of talk about that. But I also knew about that because of personal experience.
Tell us about some of the key events that helped cultivate your interest in hypnosis.
What I did realize, I had read a lot. And I began to read about with Virginia Satir. I had heard about NLP. I had I had done a lot of I'd done TA. I've TA Gestalt. I had explored in addition to my own training. I began exploring other fields, and I began listening, and I began hearing more and more about Milton Erickson after I already decided to go there, and I went there, and I began to talk about him even before I went back the second time.
Would you say some more about how you met Kay Thompson? I know she was very important to you.
Oh, she was amazing. Yeah, I'd heard of Kate. Kay, I was born in Pittsburgh, and Kate was from Pittsburgh, but I didn't know her until after I had been to Erickson. But I went to Erickson the second time. I had called him up and I'd asked him if I could come with a video camera, and that was in 1977. Kay, I met, or I'd heard of Kay long before I met her, and I think when I really decided I had that same feeling about her. At my house when Erickson died, which was about 4 days after I had called to find out what he wanted me to do with the tapes, and I got an answer back, quote, "I know you'll do what's appropriate," typical. And he died about 4 or 5 days later. And then we had a memorial service at my apartment in New York. And that was the first time I really heard Kay. It was after I think it was the first conference in Phoenix. And Kay spoke, and no, I'm sorry, it was the memorial service. And we played Kay's memorial speech. And I listened to that, and I said, I'm going to meet her. And I had heard in Pittsburgh that she didn't like social workers. I was a social worker. And I didn't care. When I was in Pittsburgh, I'd heard that she'd had a terrible automobile accident and was in a wheelchair, which is kind of interesting because Erickson, as you know, was in a wheelchair. And I called her up, and she was wonderful. And we got to be very, very good friends, actually. And I went and she had me teach with her down in Virginia, West Virginia. And whenever I was in Pittsburgh, we spent a lot of time together with our mothers on holidays, and Kay and I became very, and she became kind of a mentor of mine. And then we did a training up in Boston on weekends. It was a 100-hour training, I think. And she was an incredibly important person in my life.
If a young social worker were to ask you for a rationale to receive professional hypnosis training, what would you tell them?
I would say, and this is my own experience, I really think, and I've had a lot of experience with different therapists, and I worked at Sinai for 12 years, done a lot of different kinds of therapy. I really think that what makes great therapy is the communication that the therapist makes with the patient on unconscious levels. And I think hypnosis is the best way to learn how to do that. Because it's much more, as Jeff said this morning, it's much more experiential in terms of right brain imagining, right brain moving into parts of yourself that I remember being with Erickson, and it felt like the space just opened up. And it was like I was feeling a lot of new areas that I felt so safe with him that I could explore long after the 2 weeks I spent with him, for the rest of my life, actually. And I think that hypnosis, when there is that connection between the two people, it's a special relationship between two people. And once you have it, you never lose it. It's still there, and the feelings still come back in terms of how you feel about yourself, which has to do with being in touch in a new way with your own unconscious. Erickson said, trust your unconscious, it knows more than you do. And after 35 years of working with their videos, one day I suddenly said, I wonder, why did he use the word unconscious? Because it's a quite different view of the unconscious than Freud had. I think he's gone way beyond Freud. Freud was a master genius, no question.
So, do you think that for a young person coming into the field, hypnosis is a great way to learn the language?
Not only language, life, communication, family trance, beginning to see patterns in your own family. That's Satir's work. But Erickson and Satir were not unsimilar. I think she was a master hypnotist. And I said this to her, and she said, no, I'm not. And I showed her the tapes, and she said, I work like that. So, you can see her. I had people that met her for one time, and they said she changed their lives. So they segue into their unconscious just the way he could.
Professionals and non-professionals have a lot of choices about where they can obtain hypnosis training and certification. What does training offered by ASCH and membership in ASCH offer to the professional?
Oh my God. ASCH represents excellence, absolute ethical superiority. I know I've had lots of people, not lots, but people have come to me that have been to various other institutes of one sort or another. They'll take people that are not accountable. They'll take people that don't have the educational background, and certainly not the clinical training. And ASCH represents the very highest ethics, professional training, professional competence, responsibility. But the greatest part of ASCH, I come every year. I've only missed 2 since 1989 when I first came. 90. It represents the very best that you can find in people that are committed to a way of thinking that has to do with growth, with possibility, with excellence in training, with respect for research, and mostly for the respect for the individual person. Each person that we work for is a whole world in themselves. And I think ASCH, when I come here, I really go home always touched by the commitment that ASCH the people that belong to ASH represent and support each other in.